Take it away.
Thanks. Alright, today I'm going to talk about milling your logs to get the maximum yield out of your log. Wood can be expensive, so we don't want to waste too much, although I know we have quite a few wood hoarders in the group, so a lot of people have plenty of abundance of wood, so you can afford to lose some. First, I'm going to talk about turning stock and how to mill your logs to get the maximum yield for turning on the lathe. Also safely cutting them on a bandsaw. After I'm done talking about the turning stock, I'll touch briefly on flat work. I don't do a lot of flat work, so I researched it all last night and I put together a little slideshow PowerPoint presentation for that. So here we go. When you mill your logs, first of all, when you dry your logs, if you dry your logs flat like this, you're going to get checking on both sides. This is because the end grain loses moisture much faster than the side grain, especially if the bark is on there. Wood generally takes 6 months to a year to dry in log form. So if I have a 3-inch log, it'll take 1.5 years to 3 years to dry in log form. But if I mill that up and chop that into turning blanks, it can be dry in a much faster timeline. A lot of my work I don't do twice turned. I don't want to waste half my life for wood to dry. So I do once turned, it warps, it moves, it shifts, and I sand it once, and then I finish it and sell it. So first things first, milling up your logs. The crucial part to remove is always the pith of the log. The pith of the log. The pith always goes through the very center of the log. Not necessarily though, because if you have a limb that comes out like this on a tree, there's a lot of stress on that log, so that pith will be off to one side versus the other. A tree trunk is normally in the dead center of the log, unless that log is growing on a hill or in a swamp, then it will be off to one side. That way the pith is off to one side. So whenever you look at your logs, you always have to look at where the pith is. For instance, this pith is off to the side on my log. If I cut through the pith here, I would have one huge live edge bowl and one small live edge bowl, or I could cut that into smaller pieces, cutting through the pith here. Oh, okay, perfect. This would be cut through the pith. If I were to cut through the pith this way, I wouldn't have as much yield in the log. I could get the same amount of yield, I'm just cutting it slightly different. Personally, I would cut this way, and I would have one live edge bowl, and this I would map into other types of turning stock. You can map it into plates, boxes, pepper mills, finials, live edge stock, and anything in between. When we first cut a log in half, for instance this piece, this is a cherry log. I cut through the center with my chainsaw, giving me 2 halves. If I want uniform bowls, I would turn this section as the rim of my bowl. Because as I turn this section, it naturally creates the bottom of my bowl, and I'm not going to lose much good wood because that curve's already there. I just need to remove some wood here so I have good wood to make a tenon or a spigot. A tenon or a spigot is used to now flip that bowl, hold it in a chuck, so now I can turn the inside of that bowl. That would be for a uniform bowl. If I'm doing live edge bowls, so for instance in this log, I would get 4 uniform bowls, about 8 inches each. If I wanted to do live edge bowls, I would split that log in half. Now I have 2 live edge bowls. If I wanted, the live edge bowl would be mounted this way on the lathe. This would be the rim of the bowl, and this would be the bottom of my bowl. Turning the tenon here, so now I can flip it and turn the bowl on the inside of this live edge. With live edge, the bowls look oval in shape because these 2 points are higher than these 2 points naturally from the curve of the log. That's what gives the illusion of the oval bowl. But really, if these sides came up to the exact same points these are at, it would be a totally uniform bowl. That would be live edge bowls and uniform bowls. But if I wanted to even maximize this log even further, I could take this log, split it through the pith. I could split it again right here, get a plate, a live edge bowl, a plate, and a live edge bowl. Any of these off corners that we cut off can be finials and pens. Finials and pens. When I draw out or I map out my logs, I always do this before. This way I am always guaranteed to get the maximum yield from my log. Again, if I wanted a live edge log, also you have to look at the grain pattern and where the log came from. This is the crotch piece of a log. So I have a pith here and a pith here. If I cut this way, I would also have to cut this way, and I just wasted an inch of wood. In the center, I could have pen blanks here, and I could have pen blanks here, but you only want so many pen blanks. And finials. If I cut this in half, so in order to get rid of that pith, I aligned the piths on top of one another, and I drew a line through those piths. This would now be cut on the bandsaw, or with the chainsaw. If you use a chainsaw, you'll get good at straight cuts over time. If you're doing a bandsaw, you want to go straight. First thing I do is I hold this on the bandsaw, and I look to see where the blade's going to cut, so I enter on that line. Once I'm entered in on that line, then I proceed to push this through on the bandsaw. But make sure your fingers aren't under the log here, because the blade might be passing through them. Have your logs out here where all your fingers are free of sharp blades and moving machinery. That I would cut through the center of the log to remove the pith. But first, before I even got to the bandsaw, I would cut this into lengths to dry. Whatever the diameter of the log is, you cut the length 2 inches on either side. Because as wood dries, wood moves, contracts, shrinks, warps, twists. That's what causes the cracking on the pith. So you always cut them 2 inches on either side. That way, once this is dry and cracked, I can remove those cracks, and I still have a sizable bowl that is the same diameter in length that it is in diameter. And so if I wanted to do a uniform bowl, I would turn it in this fashion. If I wanted to do a live edge bowl, I can make this as long as I want. It will just create a longer, more gradual slope and more of a wing bowl. Okay? Oh, there's a phone.
Make an extra calculator.
Who's my volunteer? I think you might be right. It seems fine.
The cross cuts, I would always do with the chainsaw. You can do them on the bandsaw, but it is very difficult to cut round logs on a bandsaw. The force of a bandsaw is going straight down into the table. So when you cut round stock on a bandsaw, you need to hold the log very tight. It has to be long enough that your hands are within a foot of that blade, because all the force is coming downwards. We don't have anything underneath. The blade can grab this and twist it, throwing it into the blade. And you hope your hands aren't here or anywhere close to that blade, because it happens like that. If I were to cut this on the bandsaw at this size, I would always put it in a jig. If it was another 2 feet, I could cut it on the bandsaw safely, because I would hold it out here, and as I went through, I would rotate it back towards me. That way this force downwards is counteracted by the force coming back. That way it's less likely to grab this and twist it and throw you into the blade. If it was this size or smaller, there's no way I'm holding my hands like this going through the bandsaw, because this will come through, crush my fingers, if it doesn't throw my hand into a blade. This would be put in this jig. This prevents this from twisting or moving as I cut it on the bandsaw. I would hold this in here flat, and I would just notch off any sort of cracks. Once I've notched off cracks on both sides, then I look at milling my wood into usable blanks. Yes?
You sit there and put on the bigger ones, blocks on each side, like a kind of cradle, to hold it stable.
When I'm cutting it cross-cut?
Yeah.
Or with the grain?
No, cross cut.
You can put, I guess you could put shims under that, but still it's not guaranteed to hold it when the blade grabs it and
Well,
twists it.
just put screw them in, like cut it on a wedge shape, and then screw it right into the.
You could, but then you're making good holes in your wood with screw holes. How are you going to epoxy those holes shut?
Hot melt glue.
Are you going to, you could use hot melt glue with
Like a wedge shape.
like wedges.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could use hot melt glue. I wouldn't use screws or nails, because if you forget exactly where that placement is, you might hit one of those screws with the bandsaw, and then you're quite pissed because you ruined the blade, the bandsaw. You need a new blade if you didn't break the blade. And if a blade breaks, it can wobble, it can move, you don't know where it's going to go.
You wouldn't need that big a screw, I wouldn't think, but just enough to hold it. It was just an idea, because I know I've tried it, and we tried it downstairs, and you were showing me how it rolls.
Yeah.
And I just had there, it's got to be a big way to do it and make a cradle to hold it firm.
Use this.
Yeah? Yeah.
Anything bigger, use your chainsaw. Take your little chainsaw here, hold up, I gotta fire up my chainsaw. And a little Husqvarna chainsaw, and I'd go right through the path just like that. Okay?